May the 29th, 2026. Guys, almost another month is over, and guys, this Sunday night, Lake Mead is going to drop below the two-tier level of 1050. Monday morning when you wake up, it's predicted to be 1049 with a little bit of change in there. It's dropping quickly. The Lake Powell situation is not getting much better, and they have just about used all of their upriver resources to keep them supplied, and they're trying to limit, and actually they're doing it, the output levels to Mead at about 7,000 cubic feet per second. Now, the demand on Lake Mead, guys, is much more, or is much stronger than we think if we look at the daily numbers on the output level or the intake level in cubic feet per second and the output level, and try to balance how that works out. But if you look at it on an hourly schedule, you'll see that you're going to get about the same number, but the numbers really can surprise you as we come into the morning and the midday area and look at the outfeet and cubic feet per second in an hourly rate, to where you're seeing, say, a 14,000 average day output. You may see peak hours at 30,000, 25,000 cubic feet per second. Now, that does not mean that that's being replenished by Lake Mead, because a few days ago, I think the 25th, the Fed started really a little early on the Tier 2 restrictions that are coming up starting Monday morning. But they came in and said, no, we're going to stop Lake Powell. That was not Lake Powell's decision. That was a federal decision. We're going to stop it and preserve it level because it's supplying power to about 5 million people. Probably a lot of money in that area. Either way, that may change. But right now, the feds have stepped in, stopped Powell's outflow. But when you look at again, I mentioned 260 miles between Powell and Mead, and going through the hottest valley in the nation, just about in the peak of summer, the evaporation amount is almost as much as the output level of Powell. And that just increases coming out of Mead all the way down into Southern California. But the numbers are starting to become staggering in a way, because again, Tier 2 starts in a couple of nights. And guys, I'm starting to see the change in mainstream media. The panic level is changing just a little bit, and the fact that they are being forced to maybe broadcast more of this information out, especially like your local, Vegas channels, Phoenix channels, California channels. But anyway, I see that mainstream media narrative starting, again, I think, being forced to pay attention to this. And that will, we talked about that happening, and that will escalate several things. One would be the time when the Fed does physically step in and control more than just the output of Lake Powell. So here we go, guys. As of today, Lake Mead's water level is at 1050.61. Now, we've been told earlier that would happen in early 2027. It's going to happen in 2 nights. Even the new Bureau of Reclamation graph shows you exactly that same information. This coming Sunday night, we're dropping into Tier 2. Water levels have plummeted more than 6 feet since March, setting about 7 feet lower than this time last year. Driven by severe regional snow drought and dry conditions across the Colorado River Basin, federal officials warned that the lake is on a trajectory to shatter its historic 2022 record low. Guys, you remember that year we were watching, and we started making YouTube friends with Joey from Vegas D-Tech and all. Well, he came out with a new video this morning. I'm not sure if he recorded it yesterday afternoon and produced it and came out, but anyway, it's the newest one that was on the channel a few hours ago. And he's getting way down to the bottom of some of the old boat ramps and looking at the sandbars rise up. Actually, it's not sandbars, it's heavily compacted silt up under the very top of some of the mountains there, some of the canyon ridge tops is what's starting to peep up. And it looks like on Mead, one of the very last marinas guys, is about to be cut off by one of these rising silt bars. That's why they tell you don't walk on them. You're talking about decades of compressed silt that is not really sand, and it can suck you up like quicksand in an instant. And they've got places that tell you that. People won't listen. Anyway, water levels have plummeted more than 6 feet since March, sitting about 7 feet lower than this time last year. Driven by drought, federal officials are warning the lake will shatter the records. Current level 1056 or 1050.61, which is nearly 170 feet below its maximum full capacity of 1229. Guys, the white bathroom rings on the canyons are like an 18-story building. And again, Joey from Vegas D-Tech on the YouTube channel, he walked down there between, I think it's called Saddle Hill or Saddle Mountain, where two large pumps that were initially put in are hundreds of feet above the water level. Anyway, federal forecasts are saying May 26, 2024, month study warns that water levels could plummet to a staggering 1,020 to 1,020 feet by summer 2027. That, again, they put out a 24-month forecast, but the actual numbers don't equate to that at all. By the way, they had that same long-term forecast on it hit in 1050, remember? 24-month forecast from the Bureau. And we would see this in early 2027. Yeah, right. Anyway, but they're saying by, and just if their numbers were right, coming into June, July, a year from now, and you're at 1020, guys, it's over. The game starts being over at tier 2, but maximizes at 1035. And then the straw that's intake 3 for Vegas, guys, it's 100 feet up off the bottom, and it's in a pretty good place, but you're still going to have some effects of the silt and things like that. And Lake Powell is in more trouble than Mead with that buildup of silt. And so you got 100 foot of silt in this huge V-shaped lake, then that replaces volumes of water that can evaporate or be pumped out, right? So you're 100 foot less. If you're measuring acre feet of water, and you subtract 100 feet of that, even with a V bottom, you realize how much water there's not really there. Think about what I'm saying. Now, if a drop to 10, 20 feet, it happens, guys, it would historically shatter the previous record low from July 2022 of 1040. And that's when we started watching again the videos coming out of Hoover Dam and Lake Mead. By an additional 20 feet. Guys, it's over for the desert Southwest. What I see surviving after all the chaos erupts and the conflicts is just what happened after the Younger Dryas in that period of time when nature rebalanced, and after the great floods when nature rebalanced. You're going to see the survivors make it. More than likely, a lot to do with the southwestern tribes, because they've been through it before. But the problems will be with the silt layer. Let's go back to that for just a moment, because it can stop up the output of both dams, even when they're below the capability of hydropower. And they could technically erode the downstream outlets at low level to where they become blocked. And then you would have to go into a government situation of somehow, I don't know if it'd be dynamite or trying to drill another 5-meter borehole through the rock to get around that silt to release any water downstream. What we're looking at is a complete mess, and it's nature overriding the stupidity and greed of mankind. Again, Newsweek, like I said, I'm starting to notice some of the mainstream media veer away from the other headlines we've been bored with, right? Anyway, the turbine threat at Hoover. Federal government has deliberately reduced water releases from upstream Lake Powell to protect its own power pool, directly accelerating Lake Mead's decline. But guys, just a week ago, the mainstream media and many others were saying the feds won't step in because their tier 2 levels don't officially start until up into 2027. Now let me say this, be very clear. Because the mainstream media does not report the data, it doesn't mean that the data is not real, and it doesn't mean that the feds don't have the exact data plus, right? They got the money to have it. But what we're looking at now is a complete collapse happening very quickly. They will be forced to step in, but they really already have. When they designated Powell could no longer let out more water than what it's doing now, that was a federal takeover, right? And guys, we talked about that Vegas has a company that is in between the middle of the pumping of the water and it getting into the Vegas water supply. And it's a big company, I don't know the name, but they filter water, right? But right now what they're seeing is they're putting out a monitor for the visitors. As severe drought conditions have sparked localized toxic algae blooms in portions of the reservoir. So that would affect fishing, your ability to eat the fish, swimming, things like that. But the access is getting critical. And as it drops, guys, and the heat increases, the oxygen level drops of that water. So I don't know how the filtration systems will handle anything other than silt, mud, sand, if it will go into, algae and things like that. But what we're looking at is a multi-attack, almost a 360-degree attack from nature, shutting this system that cannot survive back down. Man thought they could train and claim and conquer the desert. The desert has a different message. And the problem with politicians, guys, is that they always throw money in a sinking hole. Throw money at the problem instead of solving it. We saw it with the $52 million to try to revamp one of the turbines there at Mead or at Hoover Dam. And now they're talking about the national park is warning of longer wait times for boat recovery and partial launch ramp closures. We're seeing that, and again, if you look at Joey at Vegas DTEC's video today, you'll see it. Active construction, listen to this stupidity, is underway to extend some ramps down to 1,000 feet of elevation to ensure future access. Guys, you understand at 1,000-foot elevation, there's no outflow at all of Hoover Dam, especially with 100 feet of silt, and they're going to blow millions of dollars to get your boat down there when they should be trying to figure out ways to help people and not worry about their fishing boat. It's called stupidity. The Old Testament told us in the end we would be ruled by babes. Very true. And guess what also just happened is that 7 basin states missed a critical federal deadline to agree on a unified water savings plan. And that's why the government says we will step in, shifting the authority to the feds to dictate the next long-term allocation framework. This is what we've been talking about, guys. They will be forced to come in to stop at first, water protests, then water riots, food protests, food riots, power out, no AC in the middle of the summer in the desert. Perfect planning. Anyway, they're going to have to step in to quell that, guys. People don't go long without food and water or electricity without coming totally unglued. You or I or anyone else that has not been watching this stuff go on for years and years and years and trying to make some type of plan, they wandered aimlessly, blindly, thinking the government could step in and take over Mother Nature. They can make all the federal rules and regulations they want as that river dries up. And I can see a utopian type image, guys, of that 100-foot silt layer being up to the surface with just a gully of water washing through it as the data centers pump the last drops out because the Fed stepped in. And guys, today at Hoover, there were wild swings in the outflow. You know, they give you an average the day after of 8,000 feet cubic feet per second outflow. But looking at the hourly data that comes from a different site, guys, today I was looking at peaks at 30,347 cubic feet per second, dropping to as low as 1,512 cubic feet per second in the afternoon. That's telling you there's a massive pool from downstream, probably because of everyone waking up and turning on ACs in Phoenix and downstream from there. But at 30,000, 3347, guys, you're still averaging, I think it was maybe 12 hours there, of around 14,000 cubic feet per second, because you had, again, some of these low ones trying to balance it. Not Powell, just Mead. And it's like a rush to get as much done as you can before the Feds step in. Now, they are under contract, I realize that, to try to balance the downflow, not just the water, but again, the grid power to the peak of the days and all. But with the data centers running 24/7, it's a downhill race because of the aging transformers and the up to 2 to 3 year wait to replace them. A lot's going to happen very quickly, and please pay attention to it. If you're in that area, guys, think about what we're saying. And if they're right about it, early 2027, which I still have my doubts, going into 1035 and Tier 3, you're not going to have much choice. So plan now. But I think that that 2027 deadline is off. And guys, we usually just use the daily average on the outputs, but let me show you this hourly Colorado River Reservoir log. And this is Mead, this is Mojave, and this is Havasu. This is the lower sections, okay? Anyway, this morning, this 0011 is 1 o'clock in the morning. And this gives you hourly updates starting at midnight Mountain Standard Time. Elevation 1050.73. If you look at it now, it's still hanging at 1051 on the daily level information. Now, look at the output then at midnight, 22,324 feet. When it's been average, we've seen it drop, guys, down into 4, 5, 6,000. And then average out the last few days at 16,000 to 14,000 cubic feet per second average. But think about what I'm telling you. Then by 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, it had increased to 30,347. Now, this is kind of standard in a way on normal conditions. They match that output to the peak of the needs, right, with the peak timing of the needs. But when Powell is stopped, these numbers only point to one thing, and that's greed and destruction. And really the inability to stop this downhill slide. You come up to 2 or 3 o'clock this morning, 28,000, 28,350. Just look at it by the hour. Now watch what happens this afternoon. Rapid drops to try to balance it out. Guys, look at here, 1,400 hours, right? 1 to 2 o'clock. Only 1,876, and then by this afternoon, 1,512. You average it out again, you're around 14,000 something cubic feet per second. But I wanted to drop you into this hourly thing to see you how quickly that this thing regulates, and how long can they continue this 14, even if you just average all of these hours together and get 14,000 something cubic feet per second. How can you match that to now less than 6,000 cubic feet of input from Powell, with most of that evaporating in that 260-mile area? That tells you one thing, that Tier 3 is coming much quicker than they expected. And let's take a look at Lake Powell. As of today, 3,527.9 feet of elevation. It's experiencing a parallel water crisis, with water levels currently standing at that level, guys. The reservoir is operating at just 23.49% of its total capacity as intense upper Colorado River Basin snow drought suffocates crucial inflows. Mother Nature's taking it back. It's not drought, it's aridification, excuse me. It says because it sets upstream from Mead Powell's crisis is driving the broader system's decline as federal managers, again federal, restrict its downstream releases to save its own power grid. And they're not waiting to 2027, they just did it. But it's about to move much further in this Colorado River chain. Now, looking to current levels and looking at, again, its low pool, it's 172 feet below. Just like we're talking about 18-story building at Mead, they're seeing the same thing upstream. And that's Powell has long been the battery for the main engine, which is Lake Mead. It's that backup battery. No longer, not since the Fed stepped in. They're saying that it is, again, 172.1 feet below a full pool of 3,700 feet. The lake currently hosts 5.7 million acre feet of water, down 31 feet from the exact date last year. That's a lot of water. The basin's unregulated water inflow is tracking at a meager 34% to 40% of the historical average. They didn't get much snow. You're not going to get much this year. But listen, these numbers are important right here. We're talking about it being at 3527. So we're talking about 37 feet below this at 3490. You have a hydropower deadline. Minimum power pool. If the lake drops 38 feet to 3490, water will fall below the intake pipes for the Glen Canyon Dam turbines. Are you listening? Falling below 3490 feet stops all hydroelectric generation entirely, cutting off cheap electricity to tribes, rural farmers, and cities across Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. This is coming out of the Arizona Daily Star. Now, just as a few days ago in my last video, I showed you that the Bureau of Reclamations, the Fed guys, had came in and put a new graph up matching our numbers of this Sunday night, reaching 1050 and dropping to 1049. And the same thing is happening now with Powell. They're realizing their numbers are way off. Their fallback projections, it says the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's May 24th month study warns that under a pessimistic minimum probable weather scenario, the lake could plunge to 3464 by this December. Well into the shutdown. Again, 3490 was the problem line. But just this December, guys, so think about that. We're not going to make it to December with Powell. You're not. The water's not. If the water drops below the power turbines, the Bureau must rely entirely on 4 lower steel tubes called outlet works to send water downstream to Lake Mead, Arizona, Nevada, and California. But what they're not mentioning here yet is they also have this huge silt problem raising the bottom of the reservoir, knocking out thousands of cubic acre feet of water that they're actually calculating in that silt at the bottom as volume of water from the base of the canyon. They know the truth. I guess it's just part of their number game. Now, putting in that data, guys, as of late May 2026, Lake Powell is gaining roughly 0.04 to 0.11 feet of elevation per day. And we've seen those numbers, and we've evaluated them and showing that they've released the water out of Flaming Gorge and several other upstream dams to maintain Powell's elevation. But those backups are running out. It says, however, because this year's regional snow drought, severely limited winter snowpack, this vital spring runoff peak is tracking at an incredibly weak 33 to 40% of the historical average, meaning the lake will peak much earlier and lower than normal before entering a sharp summer and winter drop. The broader daily and seasonal rates reveal the following structural shifts. Pay attention to this. Now, looking at the daily net gain, again, they depend on the spring peak inflows, and you're not getting it. And that's when you see the rise every midsummer and early spring to where the snowfall is making it down the canyons and down the river basin, and you start to see that rise. It happened last year, not as much as they hoped for, but we did see a rise in the levels. But now they're not seeing it. The elevation shifted upward from 3527 to 3527 feet over recent consecutive days, netting a minor daily rise of 0.007 feet. And guys, that's because, again, upstream inflow, and they're cutting Mead down very low. This minor daily positive rate is expected to flatline by June as weak high elevation snow melt completely wraps up. It's almost gone. And we got a high pressure dome setting over the southwest, guys. It is unrelenting. But the estimated monthly drop, once spring inflow cease in June, which they already have, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation model projects Lake Powell will plunge from its current elevation down to roughly 3510 by September 2026. Again, Bureau of Reclamation, the feds, guys. So at 34.9, you're in trouble. This is what? 20 feet? You see what I'm saying? So both dams, both Mead and Powell, are coming into the same time period of collapse. Doubling, well, not quite doubling, but exasperating the water and power outputs of both systems. The Southwest is about to go through a drastic change. The people that are smart, that have been paying attention, that probably have been putting up survival food and plans and other things, you're ready. But so many guys are, and just let me say this, somebody out there needs this right now. Pause Netflix just a moment and pay attention. You may need this. Anyway, so many people are unaware, don't want, it's either they're unaware, they hear a little voice in the back of their head, but they would prefer to keep their head down in the sand, other than look up and face reality. And when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's the old saying, right? And guys, it will not hit home to where some people will not realize the impact of what I'm saying until they have no water and they have no electricity or no AC. And when you don't have any power, you don't have any way to pump gas or go to the grocery store. It's complete chaos headed in our way very quickly, guys. We've talked about it for years. How would this happen? Now you're seeing that nature, which is controlled by our Father, the Creator, is taking back her desert. Now let's go a little deeper again. 3510 by September. But the daily summer drop rate represents a loss of roughly 17 feet over 90 days, or a steady decline of 0.19 feet per day through the hot summer months. And that's exactly what's going to happen with zero input from upstream of Powell, because the snow melt is over. If dry conditions persist into the minimum probable winter framework, listen, the water level is modeled to plunge an additional 46 feet down to a staggering 3464. Now, where was the deadline? The cut point, 3490. And look, 3464 by this December. You can forget 2027. Because at this point, Mead and Powell are shut down. This will accelerate the drop to a staggering average of 0.50 feet per day, or half a foot a day, 15 feet a month into the late fall. And guys, this is coming from the Bureau of Reclamations. It's not just me on YouTube. And looking at the entire balance of the Colorado River system, guys, the shutdown of both Powell and Mead at the same time it's wild, but that's exactly what we're looking at, possibly with just a few weeks of each other, completely hitting the bottomed out levels. Again, how will the dams hold up, guys? Think about this. You drain the water down low, you got 100 foot of sediment, compressed sediment for over 100 years on the backside of the dam. How will that structure hold up? How will they clear that once the intakes are stopped up with 100 foot of sediment? How will they clear any path for downstream? Will it be a slow rebuild of Lake Mead over 2 or 3 decades? Or has Mother Nature now finally resettled it back into the original flow? Again, when they planned all this, guys, it wasn't just a rainy season that when they started allocating hundreds of years or 100 years ago, these water rights, it was in a record rainy season. Not an average rain season, but in a record rain season where they came up with all these numbers. So they planned it to fail without even realizing. And the Bureau is saying, guys, below the intakes at 3490, again, Powell, the water level drops below the top of the concrete intake structures that feed the dam's 8 hydroelectric generators. If the Bureau of Reclamation tries to run the turbines below this point, it creates a powerful whirlpool effect that sucks air into the system, causing severe cavitation that can physically tear the giant metal turbine blades apart. That is why they've already stopped the output of Powell to prevent this. Now we're talking about going down 30, 40 more feet. It's over for the desert Southwest, guys. You'll have to decide how you handle it. Think about this. It was in Phoenix a few years back. We were watching, and one of the towns there had Verde in the name. I can't remember, but we've talked about it. They were having to truck water up to that section outside of Phoenix because they just didn't have any. And it created quite a problem. Trucks back and forth all the time at very expensive diesel, water costs skyrocketing. Imagine doing that on a Phoenix level. What, 5 million people or so down there? You're not going to truck that much water in. The diesels alone, or the 18-wheelers, would completely block the interstates. There's not that much water left to get. The Gila River, Salt River are low. You can't put that small Band-Aid like you did on this first crisis, on this major catastrophe. The numbers don't add up. Now again, at Powell, at the minimum power pool, 3490, hydropower is dead. 5 million people are automatically cut off from electricity in that area. If you drop down 10 more feet, 3370, at this level, water is too low to even reach the lower backup release tubes. Again, you've created a dam. It would take some very low-level demolition flyovers to take out, to get any water downstream. And the dam becomes a concrete wall, and no water can flow downstream to Lake Mead, Arizona, Nevada, or California. Listen to what I'm saying. This region will be reclaimed. It may take a few decades, but the immediate effect is not going to take over just a few more days as it begins to slide this Sunday night. And again, looking at this, even the feds, guys, are having to change their mind. Listen, it says, according to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's probable minimum 24-month supply, Lake Powell is projected to drop 3464 by December 31st. Again, this means the reservoir will drop 26 feet below the total shutdown threshold of 3490. Guys, again, with that silt layer, the water level it will not take long before you start seeing that silt be the very surface of the bottom of Lake Mead, Lake Powell. And now they're starting to understand the implications. Coming from the water education section of Colorado, guys, it says, this means the reservoir will drop 26 feet below the total shutdown, 3490. Falling to 3464 would trigger a serious infrastructural and legal crisis. It would create water wars that would quickly turn into water protests, water riots. Again, just like we said, and forcing the feds to step in. So it's not just a natural or a Mother Nature war on the people there. It will become much deeper than that because of the feds stepping in to try to maintain some peace. But when all of that authority, your water rations, your gas rations, your food is handed to you by the government, they have you right where they want you. And just looking back at today at the hourly water output from Lake Mead, getting up to 30,000 cubic feet per second, guys, what kind of mentality is that downstream? I mean, who's pushing the buttons? We know it's by law, it's legally tied in, you got to do certain things. But we saw with Lake Powell, the Fed step in, maybe was the 25th or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, right around, it wasn't long ago, and stop that output to protect Powell. Will they do the same thing now to protect Mead, or will the greed and the money from downstream and the big data centers force that gate to stay open? And that will just increase, or it will decrease the time it takes for complete devastation of the power and the water generated from the entire Colorado River system. And guys, if you look, again, the alignment of it, the tube dams going down together, it says, under the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's baseline track, Powell hits its 3490-foot shutdown, marking December 2026. At that exact same time, Lake Mead is projected to decline roughly to 1036, putting it just inches away from the 1035-foot threshold. Simultaneous collapses. Mother Nature's coming full force, and she knows the art of war. And guys, again, like I said, Mother Nature knows the art of war. When it's getting unbalanced and tired, and Atlas decides to shrug, then look at this satellite image from today. Look at the high pressure setup over this entire region. The blue greens are moisture, not happening, not in this area. And this goes even further north than what we're talking about, Lake Powell and all, pushing all the way up into Alaska. Look at that. Dry air. This is just the bottom of that funnel. But what it's doing again is putting a dome over the southwest, pushing all the moisture back on the other side of the Rockies, moving it up north from this point. It looks like it's going to hang in there. Why? Because, as I showed you in the last video, the steering currents disappeared this year. We'll take a quick look. I'll show you. Now, let me say this. I've showed you this image a few times, but each day it changes. And I was asked in the comments, VP, can you show us multi-days going back and forth? And so that's what we're doing. I've been showing this, maybe 4 or 5 videos. So we're going back a year to date now, and this is why we're seeing the collapse. Jet stream. See that? That keeps the moisture pushing, gets pushing out of the Atlantic, through the Caribbean, up through the Southwest. Now let's go again. You wanted to see multiple days. We're going to go from a year ago then to a year ago now. Guys, and those steering currents have completely disappeared. Very unusual. The main thing about it is it's not going to let any moisture into this high pressure area. It's like a stagnated high pressure zone sitting there, and we don't know how long it will happen. We saw it in the southeast a few years ago, 2023, maybe 2024. Terrible. But we weren't in the desert. It was still terrible. But now that current is gone. That upper level jet stream no longer exists. Look at that. Nothing's moving. It's called stagnant, and it has set into the desert southwest, and all arrows point to complete shutdown of the Colorado River water and power systems. You just cannot make it. Like I said before, no judge, no federal authorities can make the river rise. They can adjust the dam levels for a small period of time with no upstream rain. So now it's up to you. If you're in this area, you're the start of the migration. Anywhere in this complete Colorado River area, you will become the start point of the migration. But we're seeing problems all over the nation. Keep that in mind. You may move to a wetter climate or wetter area, but we are all having problems. It's time to prepare. Again, it makes me think of the ant people, the Hopi, and how they survived. And the same scenario going back to Darren Kuyu, when Mazda told Yima how to create these underground cities to survive. Very similar, we're talking about Earth cycles and Earth ages. And what's so amazing, even though it's going to be a lot of trouble, is that this generation is going to see the end or part of the end of this Earth cycle. Again, not by flood, but by fire. What are we dealing with? A very hot desert, guys. We're watching it. Thank you for dropping by and taking a little bit of time to do this. If you got friends and family in that area, pass the word on. Now, of course, you're going to be immediately hit with, oh, that's crazy BP. That's why I was showing you the numbers from the Bureau of Reclamation to match what we've been looking at. So all you can do is tell them, ask them to pay attention to it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? They'll drink when they get thirsty enough, and they can become calling mom and daddy, say, you got a place we can get out of this desert? Can we come see you for a minute? You know what I mean? And that's exactly what we're going to see. So prepare on both sides, parents, grandparents, and kids, because it's going to be coming home to mom and daddy and grandpa and mama and asking for a little bit of water and food if they live in this area. And I know quite a few that do have grandkids and kids there in Phoenix. I've tried to get them out of there for a long time, but you know how it is. But when it gets hot enough and thirsty enough, there'll be some calls. And just like the old song about Las Vegas, nobody calls from Vegas just to say hello. Same thing through the whole Colorado River Valley. It's going to be, have you got a place we can go? That's how it's going to be, guys. Anyway, just trying to keep it light a little bit. This thing is much more serious than what many people realize. We have watched for this period of time to come. We didn't know exactly how it would occur or how it would happen. But now the data is showing exactly the center of the bullseye. Again, God bless every one of you. Thank you for coming. It's a heads up, and be safe.